There is nothing I love more than taking on impossible odds, pushing myself to go past what I think I'd be capable of, and the satisfaction of coming out victorious in a David versus Goliath type battle. Man versus monster, taking on beasts that are 5 times your size and slaying them is unlike anything else that I've experienced, and Monster Hunter encapsulates everything I love with gaming. Though it did take me quite a while before the franchise had its claws into me. I've played plenty of games that were difficult challenges across many different genres such as MMOs, Souls-likes, as well as fighting games. Yet with all that experience, Monster Hunter was unlike anything else. The odds always being stacked against you and the necessity of using everything at your disposal to survive and defeat your foe is ever present. Yet somehow, Monster Hunter was never on my list of games I wanted to play despite it fitting what I enjoy to do. So what took me so long to get into it? Well, Monster Hunter is a complex franchise that constantly tries to innovate on itself and try new things with every new entry, with both success and failure. There's tons of information that you get blasted with almost immediately and has the same problem that a game like Path of Exile has, in my opinion. Not knowing where or how to start, as well as the many options provided to you, immediately gives you that analysis paralysis that new players tend to experience in games like these, ultimately causing them to outright quit. That was at least how my story went with when I first began playing Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter World's release, like many other people, was my first introduction to the franchise, and with a lengthy tutorial and subsequent choosing your weapon of choice was when I immediately got overwhelmed. The Hunter in World has access to 14 entirely different weapons that each have their own strengths, weaknesses, and playstyles. As a new hunter, it is incredibly overwhelming to open your equipment chest and see all the different varieties of weapons, so how do you realistically choose between them? I did what I thought was sensible and chose to try weapons I typically enjoy in other games, yet the 2 I attempted to learn, which were Greatsword and Longsword, caused me to be bored and soured my initial experience. Greatsword's moveset felt incredibly limited and one-dimensional, while Longsword didn't have enough move variety to keep me interested. With very limited knowledge of the game and how the combat worked, I expected something akin to a fighting game's combo style system with each weapon. And while technically the case, it is incredibly simplified, though that wasn't my gripes with these particular weapons. I wanted something richer than Dark Souls 1 button spamming, and the most efficient ways to play both weapons felt incredibly boring and unrewarding to me, which spiraled into me quitting altogether. It wasn't until years later, with Monster Hunter Wilds announcement and being surrounded with my friends' excitement of the legendary franchise, that I regained a spark of interest. Seeing these huge fans talk about their favorite weapons and convincing me to give it another go before Wild's release was what caused me to properly go down the rabbit hole. While I ended up doing research and watching the weapon announcement trailers for Wilds, one of my friends sold me on a weapon that I wasn't expecting. She described it as a weapon that could do everything on its own, plus it explodes, the weapon being Charge Blade. That alone was enough for me to try the game again with a renewed interest. Finding a weapon that suits your playstyle and aesthetic is probably the single most important thing when it comes to loving Monster Hunter, and I can't express that enough. There is so much variety and different ways that they allow you to play that everyone will find a weapon for themselves and for what they set out to do within the game. So when I got my hands on Charge Blade and began practicing, everything about Monster Hunter clicked. I finally found my sling that would make me love this game and help me beat these Goliaths. This is the true starting point of your journey as a hunter, as now it's time to set out and slay these monsters. Each one of them is a threat in their own right, and while some are way less dangerous than others, there is a clear difficulty curve when first starting out, allowing you to grow at your own pace as a hunter. Each of the beginning monsters have pretty telegraphed attacks and are generous in their windows to allow you to attack and get a grasp on using your new weapon. This is the perfect time to take risks and try to learn everything you can about your weapon. While learning how to be the most optimal is fine, the most important thing is learning what options you have with attacks in order to respond to what the monster is doing at any given moment. For those without full mastery of a weapon, luckily Monster Hunter is a game that promotes jolly cooperation and almost always allows you to party up with others once certain conditions are met in order to take these monsters down and complete your hunts. I, on the other hand, opted to progress through the game solo as not only an additional challenge to myself, but to prove to myself that I could overcome each individual monster. It also allowed me to truly experience these monsters, to form my own opinions about each of them individually, and come up with my own criteria for the fights I liked and didn't. The core idea of the games is that you party up with 3 others and take on the monsters you wish, collect their monster parts, craft armor sets and weapons that are unique to each of them and that you can make builds around. There are 3 separate tiers of difficulty when it comes to story progression, going from low rank, high rank, and then master rank. While there is no rush to get through these ranks, I wouldn't recommend focusing on getting best in slot gear or farming armor sets until mid-high rank, and just use whatever you think is cool and appropriate for the content you're doing until then. There are a lot of skills that are in these games, and each weapon prefers certain ones over the others, though these only particularly matter depending on how well you wish to do individually and how optimal you want to be. Item crafting, on the other hand, is extremely important in these games, and managing the items you have as well as gathering resources to make healing items and useful utility items and your willingness to do tedious gathering will determine how smooth of an experience you'll have. One of the core principles that you'll learn is using everything and anything that you have in your disposal to win. How prepared you are with gear means everything, and the best hunters look like Batman with prep time. When it comes to World, I do have quite a few gripes and concerns going into Wilds when it releases. A lot of fans as well as newcomers are quite worried about the performance in Wilds, as we haven't seen great results on anything other than high-end PCs currently. I'd remain cautiously optimistic, but if you're on the fence of purchasing Wilds from this alone, I'd hold off until reviews from content creators come out and form your opinions then. Keep in mind, currently I've only played through World and only a touch of Rise, so I don't have knowledge if Rise fixes these following issues or if Wilds will on release. For gameplay, however, the tutorial, if you could even call it that, is abysmal, and had I not had friends helping me or my viewers when I streamed the game, it would have taken me forever to learn the game naturally, and I'd love to see a true tutorial in Wilds that helps guide players to making more informed decisions with weapons and learning the systems. Mantles are another concern as they are planned to return, however I'm specifically concerned with Temporal Mantle. Temporal Mantle lets you dodge up to 6 attacks with some exceptions with endgame monsters. The biggest problem with it is that endgame monsters, regardless of how good your gear was, felt necessary to use it as most of them could 1 to 2 shot you without it equipped. The balance of the endgame felt entirely tied to it existing, and the damage monsters could do were over-tuned to compensate for it and really disturbed the flow of the game for me. I'd much rather monsters interact with the players in interesting ways with their attacks than worry about any 1 or 2 hits that may land causing me to die without the ability to recover. On the other hand, hunters were given the Clutch Claw with Iceborne's release, and it completely ruins the flow of the player's combat. The Clutch Claw allows you to attach yourself to a monster to tenderize specific parts to do more damage, or if they are not enraged, shoot them into walls for big damage and a knockdown. This removed any tension from trying to use your weapon fully in every encounter to constantly managing the Clutch Claw with tenderizing parts and wall banging, and choosing not to engage with the mechanic was completely detrimental to a lot of fights in Iceborne and caused them to feel lame. Going from an experienced hunter that knows their weapon to looking at a mini-map for an icon to tell you, "Honey, it's time for you to go into the wall now," is incredibly unfun when every previous encounter prior was just effective use of your weapon. Finally, for whatever ungodly reason in World, you cannot party with friends at the start of fighting a new monster, and you must watch their initial cutscene before you could call your friends in. There is nothing more unenjoyable than looking forward to fighting a new monster with your friends, having to wait to find it on your own, watch a cutscene, then SOS flare and wait for your friend to join before fighting it. While these cutscenes and potential pauses for multiplayer were confirmed for Wilds, I could only hope that these are infrequent or for endgame moments similar to Fatalis. Despite my gripes with World, there is a lot of care and creativity in these games with monsters, and while my main enjoyment was their gameplay designs, the developers put quite a lot of thought when creating each one. You're a hunter braving the wilds and exploring their habitats and tracking them. Each creature feels like they belong and are part of a real food chain. This makes it incredibly exciting when you do eventually encounter monsters that do not belong in the biome's food chain, as even that feels like a natural progression of the increasing difficulty of the monsters. Each one has their own separate looks, quirks, and personalities, and even variants of monsters feel like unique experiences both in combat and appearances. There's also the aspect of being able to sever and destroy monster parts, which causes them in turn to behave differently and shift the dynamic of the fight, adding a whole new layer to the combat, all while making you feel like a complete badass when these moments happen. Figuring out where the monsters are weakest by paying attention to them as you fight or researching them in game as you collect data on them and applying that knowledge in combat makes Monster Hunter stand on its own when compared to boss fight equivalents in Souls-like games. While I enjoy fighting Souls-like bosses, the encounters with some exceptions always feel stagnant with how they move and operate regardless of health percentage, while monsters truly act like living creatures that are affected by battle through their scars, exhaustions, and behaviors. The difference between fighting Pontiff Sullivan and always knowing you could freely parry his opening move, compared to fighting Nergigante being a beast, feels like a night and day experience and adds to the replayability of every fight and feels a lot more engaging and was what captivated me throughout my journey. I started playing with the intention of conquering the gauntlets of monsters that World had to offer, and all the while I heard of one in particular throughout my hunts called Fatalis. I knew nothing about the encounter other than the difficulty, and even with all the warnings, it didn't do it justice. Speaking purely about my journey, getting to Fatalis made every hour I put into the game worth it and fit exactly what I was looking for. The frustration and my commitment to killing Fatalis was comparable to doing some of the most difficult challenges that I've beaten in other games. I prepped everything I could, from getting my best in slot gear and utility items that I needed to take him on, and when I got to witness the cutscene and see him for the very first time, all I had was nothing but anticipation. I got to witness a variety of unique and cool looking monsters on my journey, and my first thought of him was, this dude is really just a regular ass dragon. They really decided that the king of all monsters was just a normal dragon. I love them to death, don't get me wrong, but I cannot express my disappointment enough when it comes to his design. I understand now that the most dangerous monsters in the franchise look like the most basic of the mythological beasts, but with all the cool designs I saw prior in the game, I was in shambles. Though you know what they say about judging a book by its cover, and man, did he deliver in everything else that I wanted from him and more. I won't spoil too much about the fight, but having to fight the most deadly and destructive monster in the game and being on a time limit of 30 minutes was nerve-wracking and exhilarating. All the challenge, frustration, and bullshit that I wanted to experience and more was here in the fight, and the steady 70 hours of progression I needed to finally solo him was one of my favorite experiences that I've gotten to have over the years of playing games. While Fatalis may have been the final boss, my triumph over him didn't feel like an ending to my journey, but a beginning, because I knew at that point that I fell in love with Monster Hunter. Yes! 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 Oh my god! Oh my god! I fucking did it! I fucking did it! Oh my fucking god! I fucking did it! Oh my god! Oh my god! Eat shit! Eat shit! Eat shit! Eat fucking shit! Oh my god! For those of you who watched from start to finish, thank you so much for watching the video. I plan on releasing more Monster Hunter content when Wilds releases, and I hope you'll be there for my journey through it on Twitch. You've heard it before, but please like, comment, and subscribe if you wish to see more videos like these from me. Have a good one.